Welcome to the Southwood Podcast, where we support the mission of Southwood Bible Church to teach the Word, strengthen the body, and defend the faith. Through engaging conversations, our goal is to equip and encourage our members in the Christian life. Welcome back for episode 3. Today we're going to be talking about planning, specifically a framework for the future. So we've previously talked about our mission, vision, values, and now we're talking about strategic planning and implementing the mission, vision, and values. Mm-hmm. So why is planning important, or is it important?
Well, without a plan developed and laid out there, how are you going to accomplish your mission, vision, and values? So the strategic planning is really how do we get the rubber to meet the road and come into reality. So I think strategic planning is a must for seeing through a mission, vision, and vision.
A mission, vision, and vision?
A mission, vision, and values. There we go.
Or a double vision.
A double vision.
When we just talk about the word planning, though, I think we all have plans. We make plans for Friday nights. We make plans for going places and travels. And to do that, and why we do that, I would think that we want to see the outcome come out of the plan, to have the end run be planned out and scheduled. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about planning in general, God has a plan, and we talk about God's plan, God's will for us, God's plan for history, and so on and so forth. Why wouldn't we bring it to a local assembly for the very purpose of saying, here's where we want to go and how we want to get there? So when we add the word strategic, we're actually saying we have a way, an end run, I guess is the best way to say that, and how we want to get there. Mm-hmm. So a plan is good in all phases of life. I think when we talk about people that don't have plans, or we talk about, what is that called, that year after high school and they want to take a year off?
The gap year.
That gap year. And what is the gap year usually saying? To me, it usually says you don't have a plan. I'm searching, in Europe or something for a plan, but you see successful people, they always have some kind of plan. They have some way of arriving to where they want to go and what their goal is. I don't see any reason why a local church shouldn't have a plan.
Yeah.
That's, and how, now, well, when you talk about a plan, you can't always lay it out step by step, but you say, here's where we want to arrive, and here's what we see is the best way. That's the strategic part, is how we can arrive at that plan. So I think it's a necessity at times. Otherwise, you're just without a plan, you're winging it, kind of thing. And that could be, it can be okay at times. Most of the time, it's not successful. You don't see a success coming out.
I think that without logical steps forward, that would probably lead to not accomplishing the results that you're after. Something that came to mind was I was in my dispensationalism class with Jeremy Thomas, and and you've probably heard me use it in sermons. He likes to call the covenants God's strategy. And
that's an excellent thing, because it is God's plan.
It's his plan. Yeah. And so he says, but he would say, Mike, the strategy of God is the covenants and how he saw that through apart from human will. And so the strategy of God was where he's going to do this, and this. It's the movement of God, God's plan to see through what he's trying to see through, through the Messiah, so on and so forth. And if we look at it that way, along his strategic plan, there were certain things that needed to happen in order for the end result to come around. So,
well, let's talk about the small things in life. I mean, I think this is important, because do we plan for small things, or we would consider necessities of life? So this Sunday, I'm doing a teacher's meeting, and I have a plan to how I want to accomplish it and what I want to do. Otherwise, if I walked into this meeting and just said, any ideas? That would be...
It wouldn't go very great.
That would be... And please don't take this wrong. I know you all out there are part of our church that are listening, but it's like the inmates running the asylum. You just don't want helter-skelter. You want to have where you're going to go, what you're trying to accomplish. And I think it also keeps everybody on the same page. So if you're doing it with a church or let's take it out of the church. We're opening a business. What's the model we want? We have to have a plan. We have to have a plan where we're going to rent, what area is best for whatever business we're setting up. You do all that footwork like that. So we look at the people of the church and what we want to accomplish in this church. We look at our biblical values and mission statements and those things that we want to bring in this specific. And we say, here's where we want to arrive theologically, where we want to arrive physically as a church. How do we get there?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a normal part of life. People get scared because they say, oh, this is what we have to do. Yeah, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with saying this is something we have to get done and be a part of? And I think it makes people, or should make people, want to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I've been working on building this framework to create a plan, one of the things that I want to see happen, and the purpose of the plan, is to provide purpose, motivation, and direction. And those three things for leadership, but also for everybody in the church to say, hey, we're doing something. This is where we're going. And hopefully in doing that, it'll provide motivation for them. And they'll say, okay, well, this is why we need to do X, Y, and Z. Here's where we're going. And in seeing that, hopefully that's a motivating factor to spin up some participation and engagement.
Mm.
Well, let's take it back a few steps too. You've been involved with church startups or church restarts or church. What usually happens is they don't answer the basic, who, what, why, and where kind of questions when they're doing certain things. They just say, well, this is a must. We have to have a church because we got 6 people that want to come together or whatever. The number doesn't matter. But they never, you put here, what is the purpose? The idea of what is the foundational why? Why are we doing this? Why is a church meeting? Is it just to come together, open up a Bible, and that's, it's good teaching, but there's nothing else? That's not, again, a plan for a church. A church is, to me, an extended family, and families has plans. We work together. And the main thing I think you put up here, that when we talk about these ideas, we have to answer the question, why are we doing podcasts? Why are we doing whatever we're doing? What is our goal? Isn't that a plan?
Mm-hmm.
So, when you come up with a sermon and tomorrow you're teaching, and we have where we want to arrive. We want certain points we want to bring up. That's a plan. So I think most of the things we do in life are part of a plan. Why not incorporate that into a church and at least have, I guess the best way I would say this is a conglomeration of people that come together to say, this is where we want to go. This is where we want to see ourselves. People have a tendency not to be involved in a church. I can't answer the why, but this at least says, this is why we function. Where do you see yourself being part of why we're doing this?
Yeah. And, there's not very many churches that I've encountered who have a cohesive, an actual plan. There might be a few guys in there who have an idea of what they're doing, but there's nothing that's on paper or being communicated to the church, generally speaking. And I don't understand why. I mean, it does take a lot of effort to put a plan together, and you're going to butt heads with, the leadership is going to have some of the butting of the heads to build that. Well, I don't like that idea, or this idea, it's never going to work. So maybe that's part of it. There's the opposition that they don't want to go through, but I really don't know why there's not effort being put into building a plan.
Wow.
Well, and one more part of that, I think oftentimes the response is, well, we're just going to trust God, and it becomes kind of this mystical, we're just going to trust God. And again, we've talked about this. I understand the thrust behind that and what they're trying to communicate, but God's delegated responsibility to church leaders to be responsible stewards of the church. So without taking time to plan and go through some of these steps, is that good stewardship?
To answer your question somewhat, because it's an intriguing question, why do people not want to plan? Why do people not want to engage in a direction they may see fit? I think there's a bunch of things going on in 2025 that we've come to. So to not to belabor it, I think one of the reasons is we don't train people anymore to be planning. And I'm talking about even down to the family, the individuals. Where do you see yourself? I love asking people the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Yeah, because that's not, it's close range. 5 years is not that far. 5 years, you can get a degree at least if you're doing that. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? Ask the same thing, a question to the church. Where do you see your church going in 5 years? How are they going to arrive there? Or do you want to be part of this? I think it also helps thwart the inculcation of bad doctrine. Because you've already got this concise thing you're driving to. You've got the concise, the consistency of leadership, the unity of leadership that's saying this is where we're going to go. And people see the leaders going in that direction. I also think we have allowed ourselves not to teach the next generation, your children, your children's children, to not only be in church and be pew sitters, but be involved. And at what age? People say, oh, they're too young to do that. I don't know if they're functional and human beings. There's certain things any kid can do in church to say, I want to be part of where this church is going. Think of maybe you guys. I've been in church since I was 11. You've been in church since you were in the womb.
Yeah,
right?
I was. Yeah.
But even before I was in church, I was in temple, and there were certain things we were responsible to get done even as young kids. We had to pick up the grounds. We had to look nice for temple. We had, uphold certain things, not be, it actually was stronger than school because the demands were higher. You were serving God. I don't know if we've inculcated that to our children anymore.
That's interesting. That's something I've been thinking about a little bit, is particularly in conservative Bible churches. And, there's an idea of, well, we have to train the youth. And I think we often trick ourselves into thinking, well, we're teaching them good doctrine and that's what we're supposed to do. But there's a failure if we're just teaching them, this is true, and it's true. That's not enough, because if they're not engaging and we're not cultivating and developing them into active believers and getting them into various forms of ministry, that's a failure as well. Right. It's not enough to just teach. Right?
And again, the responsibility for that lays in various hands.
Sure.
I believe, again, it's a parental responsibility first and foremost, but it's also ours. I remember when Robert was little, he was about 10. And I said, Robert, your job is every Sunday when fellowship is over, before the second class starts, you shut the lights off fellowship. And when you come walking in, because he walks in the same way every Sunday, I looked at him and go, did you shut the lights off? He goes, and he goes back and shuts the lights off. Now it got to the point, he doesn't do it anymore probably, but he had done it so much, I didn't ask him. So how big a responsibility was that? But he was given something to do, different things like that. And I think parents should be doing that. You're part of this church. You can't just sit here. You got to do certain things. And we, all of us, should always encourage parents to say, hey, I just gave your kid a responsibility, whatever it might be.
Sure.
Like I'm going to, this is not a kind of condemnation.
You can just say it. It's fine.
No. For instance, I would have a rotation of which kid's got to sweep that room and pick up things every Sunday, and that's your responsibility. Keep this place clean. And when you're done, if you've got extra time, go check the other rooms for their garbage or something. Those little things like that. Because I know it sounds like a job, and we don't want to give kids jobs in church, but it makes them feel part of the church. I mean, why are we not doing this? So when we talk about later, how will they fit into the plan? Now we've got young adults, maybe 20-year-olds that are now trying to find out the gaps that are going on in them, and they don't know where they fit into the church's plan because they've never been involved in the church.
Sure. And
now all of a sudden we want to engage them in something that's kind of foreign to them. Why were we engaging them when we were 10, 11, 12 kind of thing? So I think that's all part of that. And it's, again, mainly a parent responsibility, but I'm not going to pawn that off and say it's just their responsibility. It's all our responsibility. So when we have a plan and a strategic plan, we're not just plugging in adults. We're plugging in those next generation of adults.
Yeah. Multi-generational execution on the plan.
Hopefully not executing.
Yes.
Well, depends on
That's
how you
happened before.
yeah,
If you
interpret
do,
that.
if you do one, all the rest fall into line.
So
Just kidding.
multiple generations executing on the plan. How's that? Is that better?
That's
well,
it.
better said. So we talked about why a strategic plan. So the next main point here is, how does planning support our mission, vision, and values here at Southwood Bible? What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, again, how does it support it? It supports the mission, vision, and values because it gives those things some teeth. It's saying, okay, here's what we want to do. Here's how we're going to try and do it. And he gives us a way to hold ourselves accountable. It's a tool. And I mean, like all tools, you can misuse it, you can overuse it, you can break it, you can not use it at all. There can be some ways where you can get too granular with the plan, and you're so focused on, the details to where you're not allowing flexibility for change later on. And then I think on the opposite spectrum, you can be so loose with it where it's not really a plan anymore. And I think you see that in other like at church constitution. Some churches are like, everything in the Constitution is law, and we can't deviate from this one iota. We'll never change it. And other churches, it's just, we have to have a constitution to satisfy our legal requirements, and we don't listen to anything that's in there. And so there's a lot of room in the middle for using that tool appropriately.
One of the things, as we've been kind of discussing this with our audience and with ourselves, our mission statement is to teach the word, strengthen the body of Christ, and defend the fundamental doctrines of the faith. That's all fine and dandy. The question is how are we going to get how's this going to get done? How is that going to get done? How is this going to get done? And what do we mean by those things? So let's just explore it real quick. Teach the word. Does that just mean pulpit supply, or does that mean?
I think that's the perception a lot of times.
Right.
Is well, we have 3 hours a week. That's the teaching part of the church. And I think we've talked about this before. If you're only doing something 3 hours a week, you're not going to really grow. That's kind of enough. That's in terms of physical fitness and diet and exercise, that sort of thing. That's enough to maybe plateau, but it's not enough to grow.
Yeah.
And so, again, with the expectation of spiritual growth, is that 3 hours enough to grow? No, it's
right.
Not.
So when we talk about teaching the word, we're talking about the people being self-responsible, I guess is the best way to say it, to get as much as they can in. I've had many people over at least the 14 years I've been here in Tulsa to ask me certain things about the Bible. And I said, I've already taught that lesson, such and such, and I'll give them some kind of vague date because I don't have the wherewithal to remember when I taught something. And I said, go back and listen. And it comes across sometimes is they don't want to listen to something, don't want to put the time in. They just want you to answer the question real quick. And I've always been the worst kind of pastor is, I'll tell you where to find the answer. Because I think teaching the word also has to do with telling people how to arrive at their own answers, how to search the word for themselves. Sometimes I think a good thing is to do is teach something that they got to say, oh, I don't agree with that, and go search the word for. So teaching the word is the responsibility of the church. We should be doing that. Otherwise, we're not a church. At the same time, we should be teaching people to find and be consistent, do stuff for themselves.
Yeah.
Because again, 3 hours of anything a week, you're going to outnumber that by other things you do. People eat more than 3 hours a week. People watch TV 10 times more than 3 hours a week. So the second thing is strengthen the body of Christ. Well, it comes from teaching the word, but it also comes from interaction with the family. And the body of Christ is important to know because we're dealing with what? We're dealing with believers. So there's certain areas that we can encourage one another, exhort one another, and even say, I want to help you in this area because you're failing and I want to give you some good godly advice. The last one here is the fundamentals of the doctrine. That requires leadership to be on the same page doctrinally. So you said something which is interesting. Churches have to have a constitution and a set of bylaws in order to suffice the state. But I've always told people, go listen to a church, go be part of a church for at least 3, 4, 5 months, see what they're teaching from the pulpit, ask questions of people, because most churches don't follow their constitution.
That drives me nuts. I'm definitely leaning far more towards we're going to follow what our Constitution says. But if our Constitution isn't working, let's just change it. Instead of doing something that it doesn't say or going against what it says, that drives me nuts.
Yeah. Cone, you've read Cone's Led by a Lion, right? So there's a
hashtag Christopher Cone.
Christopher Cone.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent book.
Yes.
In that book, he discusses policy. Do you remember that section? And how and we're talking more. This is more organizational, but he says, so many companies and organizations out there, they have policies in place. Like, oh, we got to follow the policy. And then his point is, your policies should work for you. They should help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. If your policy is fighting what you're trying to accomplish, change it. Don't just adhere to it like it's concrete. So I think it's a good point.
And that's where regular review comes into play. Like this document that we're talking about building, it's something I think we need to revisit at least annually, if not like a biannual revisit. Because if something isn't working, figure out why and fix it.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And I'm all for that. I think we should review everything. Again, what happens is, and I was talking to Andrew before we had the podcast a little bit, we take information that in the 70s, so I'm not going to get into what we actually talked about. You'll have to ask me off air. But we take things from the 70s, we incorporate them into what start of a church back in the 70s when Southwood started. And we get lazy. We don't want to change. It's a lot of work to change the Constitution. You got to talk to the various people, and they want to know why you changed that, when. Again, I'm going to say this: when you learn the Word of God and you're being taught the Word of God, the Constitution, whatever our statement of faith is very vague. Not purposely, because if you're going to tell everything you believe and what you're going to stand for as a unity of, it would be a massive document. Okay. So you put points in there that are probably very concise, very important in that area, like what do you believe about God or salvation or so on and so forth. But you really got to be part of the church to feel like and understand what's being taught consistently through whoever's filling the pulpit or whoever's doing class, Sunday school classes, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. That's how you hear what's going on in the church. So if you stick to a document all the time, you may have an issue because it's going to be vague.
Yeah,
you cannot put everything you believe in there. Where you've studied in areas, because I believe our document doesn't say anything really about Israel and our stand on Israel. Why is that? Was it laziness? Wasn't incorporated or wasn't part of the thing at the time? Was it cut and paste? So you got to understand what we're saying. So again, when it comes to when we talk about these three main points in our mission statement, that's the statement. The question is now, how do we plug in and fulfill this statement?
Yeah.
This mission statement. And that's the encouragement we should see from people that they're involved. They understand what this mission statement is, and then they see through a strategic plan how we're going to fulfill that arena of understanding so that they can say, hey, they fit their mission statement. They've taught the Word of God. They're standing on the Word of God. They want to see us grow spiritually, and they maintain consistency on their doctrines.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's some movements out there right now that we would not doctrinally agree with, and we see them as problematic. However, they are doing a very, very good job of engaging people and getting them involved. And they have a direction that they're going, and they are engaging people, and people are involved. And we need to look at that and say, well, what are they doing? How are they doing this? Because where they're going is not a good place, but the way that they're going there is effective.
The way they're going about it. And again, and I'm going to say this, commercial, beware of dogs. They're fluffy, they're nice, but beware of dogs.
It's so cryptic.
Are we talking about your dog?
No, my dog's not really a dog.
What is it then? It's just a
little fluff that comes out in the cat.
we could bring
It's a
your
little
dog
dust.
here and it'll sit.
Yeah, it's a little dust
I will
money
sit
with
here.
legs.
But if you think about, and this is a whole arena of things that we're opening up, but most business models, and I think a lot of these things become business models, and we got to stay away from that. At the same time, there's things we can learn from a business, but these business models really know how to get people involved and engaged, and sometimes it's through show, through fluff, different things.
Sure.
And they'll take a doctrinal spin on something and just run with it, and people are not engaged enough to verify the sources. And I think that's important, but we haven't taught people, again, we're going back to the teaching of the word, we haven't taught people how to verify what the information they're taking in. So question is, what are they doing well? They're engaging people at the level they're at. Sometimes we have and it's hard because we teach the Bible, and most people aren't used to being taught in a Bible in that kind of format. They want to be just engaged. They want to get the Tony Robbins of pastors. Don't hashtag Tony Robbins. They
get a cease and desist from Tony Robbins.
they want the immediate response, the immediate fill my need kind of portion. Teaching doctrine the way you are is building a foundation for them being able to source themselves. So the question is, how do we bring that mentality to the table and engage people? I go, well, one of the ways is what we're doing here. It's more of a free time to talk, to discuss the Bible, make it sound more than just a monologue from the pulpit every Sunday or Wednesday night. We're engaging. We're trying to find ways to engage people, to say, hey, the Bible is a necessity. Having a real living relationship with God is super important, and how to do these things. So on Thursday nights, we're going to start trying to do Thursday or Tuesday.
I don't know what you're saying.
Oh, Theological Thursday, right?
Yeah, we're gonna.
So
Thursday thing.
We're going to engage some important topics to us, so it'll be more biblically oriented. For now, we're working on getting through our mission statement, and we're seeing what the purpose of that is, and how to engage people now with a strategic plan to get it going, to kick it. So all these are important, but the most important thing is to have that theological understanding.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to mention, we've been talking about engagement and getting the members of Southwood engaged, and it's important to have a collective response to the mission and not just the leadership moving in the direction of the mission. And in the lesson I gave on Sunday on just like church leadership and church leaders, it is definitely a theme where people will look to their leaders in their local church and they'll be like, those are the people that are responsible for the doctrinal oversight and the teaching and the guiding and the shepherding. And then they kind of, which all that's true, but the responsibility doesn't stop with just those people. It extends to, as you've said, Pastor Bush, it extends to the fathers. It extends into the families. And so, a lot of things I hear in the business world about how do you get people to be accountable to responsibility and things of that nature is you communicate what the expectations are, like what and in this case, what the biblical expectations are. And then you follow up and you say, how are you accomplishing that? And how can we help? Rather than, hey, you need to do this. You need to do this. This is what your responsibility is. You need to do this. It's okay. How are you doing with that? And how can we help? And it really does put the onus on those individuals, like our fathers in Southwood and things of that nature of, hey, this is your role, but also we're here to help you accomplish that successfully. Let's hear from you. What do you need from us to effectively do that? And same thing with like the younger people that we've got in our church, like the young adults. That generation, generally speaking, enjoys getting involved and working on something that's bigger than themselves. Let's put some onus on them. Hey, we need help in this area. Do you think that you could help with this responsibility? And tell us what you need from us to be effective and successful in that. And that kind of shifts the paradigm from it's the responsibility of a select few, like maybe just our deacon board leadership team, to not only guide the doctrine, direct, and get everything done and move the mission forward, but hey, we're steering the mission of the church biblically, but also this is a joint effort. All of us are involved. All of us need to be engaged as a local church to successfully see ourselves get to our end goal into the future. So,
well, and that's where the church has failed. There's been a lot of outsourcing, and that culture of outsourcing has kind of trickled down because churches have largely outsourced the training of pastors to seminaries.
Yeah.
That's not gone well. But in the same way, that's trickling down into the church where parents are outsourcing the training of their children to youth pastors and pastors. And the same way with adults, they're outsourcing their own spiritual growth to Wednesday night, and that's their spiritual growth, or Sunday morning Sunday school.
Mm-hmm.
And so that culture of outsourcing has created a problem. And as leaders, there's also kind of been a failure because leadership should be providing purpose, motivation, and direction for people. And if we're not seeing that, there's a multitude of reasons for that, but it's a problem that we have to address.
I want to segue because one of the points you have here is stewardship. And I think that's interesting because I think the majority of people think stewardship is what do we give to the church?
Yeah.
And that's good but most people are thinking monetary.
Yes.
I think we have a stewardship to each other and to the local body, how we serve one another. And if we put a question, just one question out to the majority of people that go to church and say, what is your stewardship in the church? I haven't taken a poll, but I believe it would come back, well, I give X amount per week, and that's my stewardship. But is that really stewardship?
So we're talking about dispensationalism now.
A little bit.
But really, I mean, that's where this is going because we talk about, economia, we talk about Paul and the stewardship and the church, and that's what we're all dealing with.
Yes.
But there's, like you said, this is just all about money. No,
right.
There's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And I believe the health of a church is how everybody handles their individual stewardship. That'd be a good topic too, because we've all been given some idea of how to do certain things in life, whatever it might be. And when you take that into a church body, do people in general, let's arbitrarily have a church of 100 people. How many people are actually fulfilling some kind of stewardship within the body? And I'm not talking about money. And you would find out, again, it's like anything really in life, and it shouldn't be, because this is not, church shouldn't reflect life. Life should reflect church.
Have you been spying on my notes?
Probably. Probably. I'm really good at that. So I'm going to incorporate something in here. So for many years I coached baseball. It's amazing how many coaches will be on the field working with the kids, and helping them get better at whatever they're doing, hitting, fielding, whatever we're talking about. So they're doing that. But come game time, your number of coaches may have been 3 or 4. It jumps to like 30 because everybody in the stands thinks they can out-coach you and tell their kid what to do and after that.
Sure.
And they never fulfilled what I call a stewardship to help with the team, to do certain things. If we had 10 coaches out there, we could do individual clinics with dealing with the kids and dealing with. So if you're so good at hitting, come help. So the same thing goes for a church. If you're good in a certain area, why don't you help people in that area?
Yep.
If you're a financial planner, why don't you sit down with people on a Thursday night and say, free, I just want to help you a little bit with your finance, whatever it might be. If you're really good with theology, we're going to have an outside class. We're just going to have a think tank on, we could say, dispensationalism, #dispensation. But whatever it might be, we can have a sit down. I think sometimes that's your stewardship, what you're involved with. You said the word dispensation, that Paul talked about economia. The word has to do with how you run your house. Okay, so when we talk about house management, we give, hopefully, prayerfully, you have kids, you give them responsibilities at a certain age. You got to clean your room, you got to take out the garbage, you got to help vacuum, whatever it is. So you're giving them, when you look around a church and say, hey, we need help cleaning the church and we got to outsource it. Why are we doing that? Why are we that's not good stewardship.
Yep.
I think it was Davy Crockett when he was, I don't know what he was, Senate representative, whatever, says, we are spending other people's money and we're not good stewards. So when we talk about stewardship, it's not only about giving money, receiving money, spending money, but it's also individuals, how you plug in to do certain things within the church body that you're good at, to plug in those things and help with. What is it? Many hands make the work light.
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing in church, many people involved, and I find when people start getting involved, they start getting sharper in their walk with Christ.
Sure. Yep. In the list here, Andrew made note of, the management of all organizational assets, including physical facilities and the diverse talents of our members.
Yeah, I like that.
The diverse talents, because we all do have something to bring to the table. And the task then is to, how do we identify who those people are, what their talents are, and how can they plug that in to serve and to be a good steward of what they have to bring to the table. I think a good example of this is, like John O'Beck is super good on the catering and the cooking.
I want to talk about that for a second. This whole rib competition thing. Okay, so we had a tie, and John O'Beck. All right, he made some okay ribs. We're gonna revisit this next year, though, so just watch out, John.
So in case you couldn't pick up on it, there may have been a little bit of a slight in that.
I'm not gonna make excuses. I didn't put my best.
Yeah. So what he's saying is we had a rib competition, and Andrew lost.
Andrew lost.
He lost.
Hey,
John
he
O'Beck
didn't come in first.
He didn't make the best ribs, but John O'Beck.
Why?
So I bring him up because he's a good example. He's identified something that he's good at.
Oh yeah.
And he's like,
and he likes doing it.
Yeah, he likes doing it. He's like, can I serve my local church in that way? Same thing with, I had a conversation with the Spencers recently, and we had Gavin on the piano last Sunday, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
he did really good.
So he did excellent, and so and after that was after he completed that time, we were talking, and Erin makes a comment, and she says, "Yeah, we're kind of musical leaders in the church, and we recognize that in the future there will be a need there, and so we're trying to get Gavin and others involved, and same with Claire, get them involved to where they are also going to steward that well." And so there is that succession planning kind of hat tip to making sure that we're set up well for the future by having people prepared to come in and to step into the place of the people leading and serving right now.
So Wednesday night, we didn't have anybody running the production.
That's because no one was here.
No one was here Wednesday night.
Not last when I was here. So since this is going to be put out later, the last time I taught on Wednesday night, which was 2 weeks ago, we didn't have anybody running the sound and all that stuff. And I looked at Ephraim and Elijah and said, go talk to Dad because Dad's out of town, and go run it. And they both ran it. And and they did a stellar job. The only problem is when I said, "Are you guys ready?" I got 2 thumbs up, which is fine. But what I'm saying is, this is what we need to do. This is cool. We need to identify what they can do and get them doing it. And I think the diverse talents of our members, that's an interesting conversation. I don't think we want to belabor it, but that means everybody brings something to the table. So there's not somebody who can say, well, I don't know if I want to be involved. I'll pray about it. No, you're going to have diverse talent. What can you bring to the table?
Yeah. And it's an important point too, going back to the teaching of doctrine part, we're pretty good Bible teachers. And I think the temptation for men is to go, well, I didn't go to seminary. I'm not trained in Greek and Hebrew. And so I'm not going to be as effective, or I'm not that guy, and that's quite simply just not true, because I keep telling my small group guys, and people that meet me and they hear my rundown on Bible and they're like, wow, like you've spent so many. I'm like, dude, you're looking at the product of since like I was 25, 5-6 years of me being serious about this thing. And people look at me and they go, well, how long have you spent doing that? I'm like, well, I pulled my head out of the sand 5 years ago and decided to seek truth and learn and not take no for an answer on doctrinal stuff. And same thing with the young adult conference. I think it was last summer, when I got up there on stage and said to those young people, I'm like, the only difference between me and you is time and some effort to get into this.
Which is interesting, because the question comes down to, do young people not want to give it time or the effort?
Or both.
Or both. Yeah. But I think, again, anything in life, we're talking about planning. Let's bring it back to planning. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about planning, I believe you have two things involved. You have time that you want to get your plan done. So if it's a vacation, you plan for December and you plan ahead of time, so you get, what do I have to get done in certain times? So you in increments do certain things in that time frame, but you also are putting forth effort.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get the best out of my vacation? What can I do on Monday and Thursday? I think the way I plan, for instance, we went on a cruise last year and I planned ahead of time different things, and I left enough room in there to say, if that part fails or we can't do that, what do we do with the, how do we be flexible? But that planning didn't take place in 20 minutes. It took time. So we're going back to, because you almost said it, what is your 5-year plan?
Yeah.
So same with the church. A church needs a plan. They need to identify what they're doing strategically, and they need to say what we'd like to see in 5 years.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And that's a good point. And where I was kind of driving with the mention of there's not a whole lot of difference other than like time and effort, right, is we need to make the distinction that we're saying, look at what your individual talents are and how you can identify those to serve in the local church and steward those well. The temptation, I think that the trend is, people look at the Bible teaching and the doctrinal teaching side, and they'll go, well, I'm not the Bible teacher and I'm not trained, so I'm going to delegate that to the people that are seminarians and trained and things of that nature. So what I'm trying to point out is it's important not to delegate your responsibility to someone else. So like fathers and men out there, it is our responsibility to doctrinally lead in our families and things of that nature. So just because, that might not be your gifting or what you're skilled at.
We're going to have to talk about gifting at some point, because that can just get wild.
Well, I don't mean mystic.
And I'm not saying you are. I just,
yeah.
I can cut wood shelves. I don't think that's what he's talking about.
That's your spiritual. Your spiritual gift is poking the bear. Yep. So what I mean, and I didn't mean to open a can of worms, but when I look at myself and I go, hey, like I'm good at this, I would call that my gifting. And I'm not trying to be super spiritual, but looking at what you're skilled at, it's like, well, I'm not a good speaker. I'm not great with learning new languages and sitting people down and explaining things succinctly. So therefore, I'm going to delegate my responsibility of Bible teaching to my family to the pastor. We got to be careful with that too. So I just wanted to make that point. So
what I believe Mike is saying is stewardship for the church overall. There are certain responsibilities that everybody carries.
Yeah.
But we can't replace the church's responsibility with the family's responsibility. For instance, you may have a stewardship. Let's bring it back to finances. So you know how to run finances well. So you help the church with that. But that doesn't mean you're alleviated from the family responsibility from teaching and leading our children. And
that's good.
And then this is where it brings us to where we're at next in our step. What is Southwood going to do? How are we going to direct? I like what Andrew puts here. Roadmap, milestones. Those are pretty, that's strategic ideas.
Yeah. And I want to introduce, as we move into this next section, I want to introduce something to think about as we come
Harry
through
the
this.
spider.
No, but I can. So this is my spider. What'd you call him? Harry?
Harry.
This is my spider. It was gifted to me by Pastor Bush because both of these men in this room make fun of me for being afraid of spiders.
No, it's a certain spider you're afraid
Listen,
of.
I'm only afraid of the spiders that when they bite you, it ends up with like these big lesions on your arms, man.
Which also
These
just so happens to be the only spiders you identify.
That's the only
everywhere.
Every one of them.
Listen, for those listeners, when I see a spider, I know how to identify.
That's how you identify.
I know how to identify brown recluse spiders really well.
Yeah.
And these men are like, oh no,
they look like wolf spiders.
You just call every spider a brown recluse spider. And so one time we were sitting in the fellowship hall and I saw a spider on the floor and I went over and I caught it. And it turned out to be a brown recluse.
And Google said it wasn't.
No, well, your AI is right 2 times a day. It was a brown recluse spider. And Andrew was like, no, it's not. And I'm like, and I zoomed in on the photo and I pulled up a Google image and he was wrong. And then his response was he pretended to throw the spider at me, which scared me pretty thoroughly.
Shouldn't do that, Andrew.
Anyway,
shame on you.
So this is my spider. I think his name is Lucas. Lucas the spider. So this is Lucas the spider, and he's Lucas the brown recluse, as you would say. So
I was going to play the fiddle on it, but my painting skills is not very good.
It's like he's got a big blob on his back. No, so that's the introduction to the spider. But introducing this section of what's Southwood's strategic plan. As we work through this, I want to kind of steer it a little bit. So this is the challenge. And how do we get the rubber to meet the road at Southwood? How do we strategic plan? How do we see that through? The challenge is, how do we engage our people while leading without making it a democracy? So this came up in Strauch's book on leading without being God's intention was not dictatorship. God's intention also was not pure democracy. And so as we try and move forward and accomplish our plan, we want to hear the feedback of individuals in our local church, right? And their ideas. But some of what we've seen is with those ideas conflicting, or that they might butt heads a little bit. How do we balance guiding as leaders while also making sure that we're engaging our people? And so that's a challenge in seeing through a strategic plan, because if you build the plan and you're not listening to the voice of the people that are involved in the plan, then you're not going to have buy-in. And you can't push and drive a plan and get it accomplished if it's purely just being driven by the leadership. So that's something that, as we talk through this, that'll be a big point for us to discuss, is how do we do that? How do we get that done? So
that's it. That is all fantastic stuff. So let's talk about what God's design for the government of a church is, just for a moment, to how we get to where we're at. Is a church ever to be a democracy? No. Is it to be a dictatorship? Never, kind of thing. I think, even though I think replacement theology is the most horrible doctrine out there that I could possibly think of, other than Lordship Salvation and 7 other worse ones.
This is the worst one,
except for those other bad.
Except for 8 horrible doctrines. Where was I going? Okay. So God initiated with his nation a theocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can all agree on that. God was supposed to be the king using mediatorial people, Moses, kings, so on and so forth. And Israel absolutely outright rejected the theocracy.
Yep.
So when we come back to the church, this is a good question. Can a church also be a theocracy? And how does that work out? Because that's kind of interesting, because Christ is what?
The head of the church.
The head of the church.
I think it is kind of a theocratically ruled organization with a mediatorial local government. The way eldership is set up.
So when we talk about that, which is a fantastic conversation, if Christ is the head, how does the church submit to Christ's headship? Because that's an interesting thing. Because do a lot of churches actually submit to Christ's headship?
They say they do.
Yeah, and I think we've said it, we do. And everybody loves that verse, Christ is the head of the church, kind of thing. But how does that physically work out? How's that nature? That's the one with the F, not the PH. So people know the difference. Anyway, so when we talk about Christ as the head of the church, and the trickle down is he has mediators in that role of different things, are they submitting to Christ's headship? Because I believe, again, I don't want to mix things up because somebody's going to use this against me, and I go right ahead. I come back at you. Don't forget that. That's the New York side of my blood. But if you look at this understanding and you say Christ is the head, as God was the king of Israel, and now Christ is the head of the church, obviously it's different things, but I think what we have to do is still say a church should reflect a theocracy. In other words, are we going to God? Are we looking at his word? Are we getting this understanding from him, or are we making things up?
Mm-hmm.
Again, hashtag bishops. Well, what are bishops? You know, when you have churches today.
Well, clearly you don't read the King James.
That's right.
I am a King James only guy. It's only for those that like it. That's a whole. Do we have some fun with
can of worms popped open?
And I heard it. It's like Tupperware. Yeah, kind of thing.
with moldy
moldy cheese. Tupperware would fall. But if you look at the idea of bishops and cardinals and different things, different apostles, there's some churches that have apostles. Where do they get it from? Is that a biblical model?
No.
Okay,
No,
just saying that.
No,
No.
thumbs up to Andrew. But they have this government within there, and they call themselves churches. So it confuses the people. You know, I came from a Catholic background, or I came from an Anglican background, or an Episcopalian. Hashtag them all. But if you just think about it for a minute, it's very confusing to people. So people have had these in their backgrounds, and how do we look at it biblically? So we have to reflect the biblical model. So when we're talking about our roadmap should be, what does the Bible say about the church? So our ecclesiology's got to be pretty solid.
Sure.
In this arena, and at the same time, be good enough to defend why we believe what we believe, because people are going to come in and say, I had a lady once come in and say, are you eldership rule only? And that's kind of a vague question to ask a pastor your first visit at church, which takes much longer to answer sometimes, because I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know, are you talking about a reform viewpoint? What are you talking about? So I said, well, not in theory. I mean, we could talk about this sometimes. She never came back. So she didn't want to discuss it. And to me, to find something like that to say, to nix on a church is problematic, whatever it might be. It's just like somebody coming in church and saying, well, you don't have a baptismal inside. So
we do have one, though.
Yeah.
Ours is pretty cool, too.
It's that you got rid of the pool. I thought you got rid of the pool.
It's somewhere.
No, the pool, the kiddie pool?
The Coleman hot tub.
Oh,
well, we have an infant baptismal, and then we have a big
that's not, but that wasn't a baptismal. Later, hashtag spa, not
spa. Yeah, we have a spa.
We have a wonderful baptismal. It's behind Spencer's house.
The amount of context we're leaving out is wild. In their pool.
So Southwood baptizes babies?
What?
Yes.
What? No.
All of them. Never mind.
No. Oh yeah.
This cause of wickedness to come out. And we're trying to be funny. Hashtag literally just trying to be funny.
That's a long hashtag.
That's it. That's it. And it's hashtag.
Oh man.
Hashtag comedy.
So we got to get back on track.
So we're talking about roadmap. That's what we're doing.
Yes.
And then leading into milestones. You have a roadmap. You lay it out just like you were traveling somewhere on a plan, and which has its end result a change of. No, not a change. Let's say it this way: a fulfilling of our vision statement and mission statement. It fulfills that. How are we getting there? So you have milestones. What's the next step? What's the next? Have we hit this? Have we done what we needed to do the first year? Let's say. Have we done those things? Have we visited? One of the things we could say: have we visited the Constitution? Mm-hmm. Have we led? Where are we leading the people? I think that the best part is that I was taught a long time ago. You can't lead someone to a place you're not going. Yeah. So how are we doing it? How did we get to the next step? Where are we? And again, you will hear milestones are concrete. You can identify them. You can actually see you've hit this milestone and seen changes. Sometimes change doesn't come. And again, you're looking for what kind of change we're looking at, or if change is even necessary, kind of thing. But have we reached that? Now, I've been here longer than both of you, and I've seen changes for the good, and changes that's not so good. You don't like when people leave or people die and things like that. That's changes. But when you look at these indicators that are saying we've hit what we wanted to hit, then we know we're moving in the direction that we've seen fit for this local body. Sure. That's the important. And you put in here examples could include launching a new community outreach an initiative or achieving a specific target for member engagement in all these groups. And again, this comes back to when we have the church together and people have ideas and they come up with, hey, we need to do this. Okay, you could lead that. Mm-hmm. What do you need to get that done? I think it's really good when somebody in a congregation says, I have an idea, but doesn't say it's an idea for Andrew and Mike to get done, but not me. I just turn around and say, okay, that's a great idea. How are you going to help get this done? And who do you need?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Well, and that's where we're at right now is we're working. Well, this doesn't exist right now.
Right.
We're working on building it. And that's probably, I think, our biggest need right now is engagement from the leaders to help build this thing so that we can get everybody engaged.
Yeah.
Right. And that, again, it's going to take, I don't know if I want to use this example because, again, everything you use can be used against you. So big businesses, you buy stocks in big businesses. Let's say you buy stock in Google, not whatever you want to do. I'm not a financial advisor. So you buy stocks in Google. Every once in a while, they send out a thing. Most companies do that. It's a shareholders meeting. Now you own by buying stock, you own parts of Google, small part. But they want to have shareholder meetings, and the shareholders are allowed to put their input into the direction of Google. We have an investment in the body of Christ called Southwood here locally. Do the shareholders want to put in their 2 cents, or they just want to put in their 2 cents and say, whatever you guys do is good? I don't think that's good. I think the model is I think you used the word, a buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
You bought into Southwood. You've been here for a while. You need to have a voice.
So for $20, you can submit the
For $6.95, you can.
I love it.
But it's a buy-in to what you're doing. So whatever church our listeners may be a part of, and they may go to a large church and just sit there, that's not a buy-in. You may contribute money into a church, and that's not a buy-in. A buy-in is you're a shareholder. You should be part of the decisions, part of the direction, and I think that's an important thing to see. So we can see. So how do we get this? I think the next point you're turning to is how does this plan work? How does this strategic plan work? How do you make and this is me being me. I hate using the word make. How do you make people do this? How do you make this work out? I think the question would become better is how do we present it so people want to buy in?
Purpose, motivation, and direction.
Yeah.
So Andrew, walk us through just on the Southwood strategic plan, the discussion points, roadmap, milestones, points for collaboration, and strategies and projects.
So part of this was, I built it this way so that we're also developing a vernacular. Like we're trying to build or shift a culture to get more engagement. Part of that, I would like to see a vernacular where that's part of the culture. Like you look at any organization, you have a language that you speak. In the Army, for instance, everybody speaks acronyms. Like you can walk into a unit and people just start throwing out things. And if you're not a part of that, you have no idea what they're saying. And they're all on the same page. And so part of that is this vernacular that everybody is going to learn about the strategic plan. So we're talking about a roadmap. Well, a roadmap really is this whole plan of where are we going, how are we going to get there? That's just kind of an all-encompassing term. Milestones, then kind of like mile markers. How are we going to measure our progress and see where we're at? We're going to set different goals to try and reach our destination on the roadmap. And then with that, we also have strategies or projects, whatever we want to call them, is how are we going to try and reach that milestone? Because there may be, we'll try a couple different things. This isn't really working. We need to do something different. And so these strategies are going to be continually changing. And then as we're revisiting this, we're going to say, okay, we've tried 4 different things to reach this milestone. It's just not working. I think maybe we need to shift priorities and change that milestone. And so it's this living document, for lack of a better term, that is designed to help us reach a stage of maturity. This is a little bit difficult with a church to say, well, we're going to have an end state that we're trying to reach, because the church doesn't really have an end state until Christ says you're done. And so our goal is maturity. And so we want to reach maturity to where we're reproductive. How are we going to reach that? What do we want to see Southwood become in order to do that?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think you put in the word that's kind of interesting because we've been talking about planning, with strategies that go along with planning, direction, steps to take in planning. but you added a word that I think we need to be aware of at the same time, being flexible.
Yeah.
Still
That's
keeping
important.
the direction of the plan, the drive of the plan, but still be flexible, because in 5 years, I said 5-year plan. Let's do a 5-year plan.
All three of us might get hit by a bus.
That bus.
Not the same bus. That would be it.
that would not be coincidental.
No,
that would be planned.
And I would like to know which congregation. No, never. But the other side of the issue, though, when you talk about denominations, and I'm going to be probably somewhat wrong, because it may be instead of a 5-year plan, a 7-year plan, but some denominations like to change their pastors, to rotate them so that they get different input from different pastors, which doesn't always build consistency, but it helps that pastor with his 200 sermons to go do them somewhere else. But with that set up, with that idea, even though in 5 years, what's the demographics of our church going to look like?
Sure.
Are we going to get new people in? Are we going to lose people? Are people going to move on because of life experiences, death, and things like that? Who are we going to get in, and how do we now all of a sudden, we're in the middle of our 5-year plan, we're 2.5 years into it,
Yep.
and we got 20 new people and lost some of the people that were strategic. How do we plug them in? So we have to have a flexibility to our plan.
Yeah.
We got to be able to say, how do you plug in? So we've had a few new guys come to church in the last couple of months. I think one of our questions, if they want to become a member and that stuff, how do you plug into our plan? Where can we use you? Not, hey, great, you want to be a member, sit in the pew and be happy. No, how can we use you? Where can you see yourself fit here in church so that you can, fill that stewardship again? And so I think flexibility needs to be kept out there as an understanding.
Yeah, flexibility and regular ongoing evaluation, self-evaluation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to leadership meetings, maybe, and this is kind of an idea to throw out to you, throwing it out to Andrew, because Andrew right now is our head deacon. So we're sit down with the Constitution, we're reviewing that stuff, and maybe we need to review every year where our plan is, how we're working on it, who we've plugged in, and who's not wanting to plug in, kind of thing. Because John's food's great, but we also need other people to plug in areas too. So
his ribs are okay.
He came in first place, Andrew.
Hey, it wasn't a judging issue.
And listen, I'm going to tell you something. You need to pay the judges better. First of all. Second of all, if we plan it better next year, you're going to lose to me anyway. Doesn't matter.
That's fantastic.
There's nothing like a Jewish guy cooking pork ribs. It's just the best thing in the world.
That's wild.
Anyway,
so
we had Jewish guy cooking pork ribs. There's a hashtag.
It's getting longer and
longer and longer. Eventually, they're going to be paragraphs, and you'll be like me, just very unsuccinct.
So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say. So we talked about roadmap, right?
Yes.
The process of working towards the goals. We talked about milestones, and you made a very important point here. You said a vision without measurable goals is an abstraction. So they have to be measurable. They have to be something that, did we accomplish this or did we not? And then points for collaboration. We're working with the congregation. The leaders are working together, discussing things with the stakeholders or the shareholders, as we've used that term. And then we have special projects and strategies to accomplish those milestones along the way. And so that leads us kind of to our next point of, well, how does a strategic plan work? And we've identified really two groups that are involved in this: the leaders and the congregants, or the leaders and the church, the general membership itself. So the role of deacons and ministry leaders, you have written down here, we need direct involvement from deacons to develop this plan. The need is not merely for approval, but it's a contribution. So let's kind of jump into that a little bit.
Yeah, I can sit here all day long, and I could sit and draft up everything. I'll set all the goals, set all the milestones, and come up with all these things that I want to see Southwood become. But that's just my thoughts, my ideas. It doesn't mean anything to the rest of Southwood. There's not ownership.
Yeah.
And so having the rest of the deacons come in and say, I would really like to see Southwood work towards having a Bible Institute one day. Okay. And if that's a goal that we're all agreed on, there's one of our milestones. We're going to work towards having a Bible Institute or a K through 12 or a homeschool co-op, whatever it is. those are the kind of goals that we need to set. And we need to discuss these goals so that we're all in agreement about a general direction. And that doesn't mean that, well, Mike wants to see a K through 12 and Pastor Eric wants to see a K through 8. So we're going to fight about it. I mean, there's going to be things where it's like, okay, I see this going this direction. And that's where the milestones and the strategies come in is, well, let's try this and see if this works.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't. We need to shift priorities, that type of thing. But at the end of the day, this has to be a group effort on the part of the leaders. It can't just be my idea or your idea. And
another point to bring up there too is, if there's a decision that's made to move in a certain direction, and it's decided by the ministry leaders, deacons, so on and so forth, if you've got 2 or 3 people coming together and be like, we want to do this, and then the rest of the leadership team is just like, yeah, that sounds good, like, let us know how we can help. That's not engagement. That's not moving the needle forward. What we're proposing and what we're after is, like, as a leadership group, we're banding together and we're all moving it uphill after a decision's been made, with the proper inputs and whatnot. It's not just there's not a passivity of leadership that will be effective.
And putting it on paper is largely for accountability, so that everybody in the church sees this. This isn't a secret. Everybody knows what this is. So the church can hold us accountable. We can hold the church accountable, and we can make adjustments as needed. But everybody sees this. This is what everybody's on board with. That's the idea.
Yeah. So what we're not saying is, well, that was confusing. So, like, you've got the need is not merely for approval, but contribution. So we've mentioned that. So if a plan is being built, what's not helpful is, oh yeah, it looks great. Yeah, do that. Like that type of a thing. We want engagement. We want ideas. We want, hey, I want to see that through. How can I help? How can I leverage my strengths and the skills that I have in service to the local church and get involved? So, and then the role of the general membership. Our church, our people are a big part of this as well. So what is their role?
That's where it's going to be putting into motion the plan. Is dependent on them. They're the critical aspect of that. Once we have this constructed, if they have no desire to engage in that plan, it's not going anywhere, because the 7 of us, there's 7 of us, we're not going to be able to do everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where rubber meets the road.
Yep. The balancing of guiding and leading with delegating and empowering is going to be very important to see through those.
And we make it sound like this is all just labor for the sake of labor, partly. That's not what we're talking. We're not just talking about putting everybody in church to work so that we'll just achieve some arbitrary goals. It's really for the growth of the body. Strengthening of the body is one of the core tenets of our mission, and that encompasses every aspect of the Christian life. Yeah, and that's what this is aimed at.
Mm-hmm.
I think it comes down to the other thing is we can't equate what we're trying to do here with what the world does in business and clubs.
Sure.
And those kind of things. What we have here is, as a believer, let's ask this question. As a believer, does God want you to do nothing in life?
No.
And that's the problem. It comes across that a lot of people say, well, I'm a believer, and that's it. We're happy being a believer and carrying a Bible and hearing God's word taught the way you guys do at Southwood. We're good with all that, but me be involved, my involvement is showing up Sunday morning, second service. That's it. Or whatever it might be. It may be all 3 times we meet together as a church body. That is not a calling worthy of what you've been called to. When Paul talks about walking worthy, when
you got to stop reading my notes.
Dude, it's
I'm not even going to show up tomorrow now.
That's it. By the way, he's teaching tomorrow. You may not hear this, but this is going to be July
something.
6th. He's teaching. He taught the week before on June 29th, which is every Sunday, every month that has 5 Sundays, Uncle Mike gets to teach.
Uncle.
Just so he knows ahead for the next time. If it's a month with 5 Sundays, he gets it, so that Pastor Eric can listen and critique.
May or may not
over my cappuccino.
There you go.
But what we're looking at again is membership. It's interesting. When I first got here at Southwood, we had a list of people that were called inactive members. So I looked at the board. I go, how many members are actually active? Because to me, that's a misnomer. You don't have inactive membership, and if you're a member, you should be active. So when you call to get something done, let's say, hey, we need somebody to paint the library. Just hypothetically, we do need somebody. But Mike shows up with a paintbrush and a bucket, and nobody else is here. That's a problem.
Well, that means Mike gets to pick the color.
That's right. That's
right.
And I would allow him to do that as long as it's not.
Yeah, we're doing that. We're doing this salmon pink thing going
With the
on.
lime green.
That's called coral.
We'll do it. Yeah, coral. I like that. We're gonna do coral red.
You should want people to be active within your body. Should be wanting to participate with the functioning of the church. You shouldn't say, "Oh my goodness." I'm being honest with both of you. I have planned that the first 2 weeks of July, I don't teach on Wednesday, so we cancel it. It used to be the whole month of July because we had a lot of people traveling for the summer, and it gives me a break. So I've been contemplating whether to do it one more Wednesday night because we have a lot of people out of church still the third week in July. This should never be a question because we should have so many people coming on Wednesday night that a few people missing, 2 families won't say, "Oh, there's nobody showing up." So why I could do that from home and teach whatever. Again, initially was meant for me to get a break for the summer. It was my vacation time kind of thing. And anyway, the point is now it becomes, why are people not participating why do only some people come on? This is a misunderstanding with the people. And I think you would agree with me on this. They're not fulfilling the side of their salvation, which is, I am being saved. I need to walk worthy. I need to be there. Not maybe be there, but I need to be there because it's for my spiritual growth. It's for my benefit, and it's for other people. We are to interact with other people, share one another's burdens. So we have those things. So when we talk about these strategic plans in the congregation, it should be a wanna be situation, not a have to be. So I think, again, encouraging people to be participating in your church somehow, some way. So.
Yeah. I think, wrapping it up, the purpose of this planning is not just to formulate a dictatorship or impose our will on everybody. It's really to get the church together to achieve a cohesive mission and work together to go in a clear direction and accomplish that. Ephesians 2:8-9 is followed by Ephesians 2:10. There's a design for the life of the believer. And every believer is a member of the body of Christ. Everybody has a role here, and we want to equip our members to fulfill their role in the body of Christ the best of our ability, so that we're honoring God the best we can.
And to do that, it will take a plan. It'll take a roadmap, milestones, and working together to have actionable items that we can move forward and accomplish.
So there's a call to action then with this podcast in particular. We got to have involvement from our deacons, from our leaders, and we got to have involvement and feedback from all of our members too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is our church. It's Christ is the head, but as far as a local church goes, like Southwood is our little church on Sheridan Road. And
76 in Sheridan.
7655
South Sheridan Road.
9:30 and 10:45 on Sunday, and 7:00 on Wednesday night.
Boy, that turned into a plug real quick. But yeah,
solicited. Remember, subscribe and click like
wherever those buttons are.
Wherever those. I love how you point to where the buttons are, and you have no idea where the buttons are. Or if they'll even be there. I don't know.
If they're not there, find them.
But yes, so this is our little local church, and all of us have a role, whatever role that is, in stewarding and being a part of the future of this church and supporting that. So,
all right, we will see y'all next time.